Welcome to Disney Coast to Coast, a show celebrating and questioning one of the most beloved entertainment companies in the world through honest, passionate, and clear-eyed Disney discussions. I'm Jeff DePauli, your entertainment-obsessed host with rose-colored glasses removed. Today on the show, we discuss one of my favorite topics, which involves Disney Parks' character integrity and continuity. So many people say the number one reason they go on a Disney vacation is to see and meet the iconic characters around the parks. Can you relate? Well, for me, I always love seeing the characters, but it's extra special when the characters I'm seeing are presented exactly as their on-screen counterparts. Whether it's an exact costume replica, a character in the proper scale, or even a really good human lookalike. These are always the character interactions that impress me most. Listen along as my pal Derek from the Mad Chatters podcast joins me to discuss all of this Disney character minutia.
It's time to dive into today's Disney dialogue.
And today with me I have my pal Derek from the Mad Chatters podcast. Hey, Derek.
Hey, Jeff. It's been so long.
It's been a hot minute, like not only in podcast life, but also personal life.
No, it's true. Thank God for the podcast to reunite us.
I know. What the heck? No texts, no calls? I don't know.
Okay. We can get into this later.
Excellent. Well, today we are here to talk about something. I mean, I think anybody that listens to this podcast knows I am a continuity freak. So whenever things make sense between film and theme park world, it makes me a very, very happy person. And so that's what we're going to talk about today as far as characters are concerned. There are some cases where characters that we see on the silver screen or even the television screen translate into the parks very, very beautifully. But I am kind of curious before we actually jump into some examples. Where do you stand on this? Do you simply accept it as it's presented, or do you kind of like lose sleep over it the way that I do when things don't quite line up or make sense?
Well, when it comes to this topic, I do think of you first. Like, if I thought of all of my friends and if everyone had like a political Disney platform to stand on, yours would be character integrity, character continuity. That's what's important to you, and I respect that. For me, I don't know if I necessarily think of it all that much, but preparing for what we're talking about today, I did realize that with things like Mickey Mouse, kids can kind of suspend disbelief and buy into the fact that Mickey is 3 times their size. But the fact that Disney doesn't rely on that and they are able to give us these experiences where the characters do look like the ones we see on screen, that makes me appreciate it even more when they're able to do that, because they could just be like, the kids are fine. They love Mickey.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up Mickey, because it's literally the first thing I have listed on my notes here, because I wanted to ask you, like, where do you stand when it comes to Mickey Mouse? Like, which is the quote-unquote real Mickey for you? Is it the animated version or the in-park version?
I honestly think it's the in-park version. And I did not grow up going to the parks. I didn't go until I was an adult. But I don't know if I really grew up on Mickey Mouse cartoons either. So for me, Mickey Mouse was, I think, maybe I'm remembering incorrectly, but I think it was like the character we saw in the Disney World ads on TV during TGIF, the one who's 6 feet tall, 5 feet tall.
Yeah, I also feel the same way. Like when somebody says Mickey Mouse, and the first image that pops into mind for me most of the time is a theme park Mickey. So I'd actually be very curious to hear what some listeners think about that. So folks, write in, call in, let me know, because I'm kind of curious. But it's interesting that you feel the same way and you weren't somebody who grew up going to the parks. So, yeah.
Right. It's hard to put yourself in the mind of that 5-year-old kid who's never seen theme park Mickey. You've only seen the cartoon, and then you show up at the park. I mean, I imagine that has to be jarring, but like I said, so many of them just run right to him.
Well, one of the things, there are definitely kids that are scared of the characters,
sure.
Like just their massive size. But one of the things that I find interesting is, like, if you see Mickey Mouse in a cartoon, like he comes up to, an adult's knee, perhaps, as far as his height is concerned. But in the park, of course, he's much larger than that for many reasons. And to a kid, I just kind of feel like they obviously they're not thinking this deep about it to begin with, but also everything's big to a kid, right? Like, I can remember specific like statues where I grew up, where as a kid I was like, these things are massive. And then like I see them as an adult and I'm like, I'm taller than this statue. Like, it's just I don't know, the perspective as a kid is really interesting. But anyway, it's interesting to hear your thoughts on Mickey there. But in any case, my favorite character representation in the parks is when the characters we see in the parks look exactly as they do in media. Now, one of the biggest examples for me, I think, is Star Wars, right? Is that one of the first ones that pops to your mind?
Yes, and there are several reasons for that. I mean, the first is a lot of them wear masks. So like Darth Vader and Kylo Ren, it's sort of easy
Not
to
like
do that.
pandemic masks, like armor
No.
masks.
Oh my gosh, Jeff. Just a side note, just researching for this and trying to find stuff about characters and masks, that's all that comes up now. And I'm like, that's not what I'm looking for.
The world is ruined. The internet is ruined forever.
Yeah. But all that being said, like, I applaud Disney that they took it the extra step with Kylo Ren and Darth Vader and gave them voices, so that adds to the believability a bit. But I do think in general, Star Wars, they're able to get away with more for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot easier, right? Like, there are full helmets, as you said. So, like, some of the earlier examples, though, I would say, actually, yes, they are characters in park, but they're also animatronic figures, C-3PO and R2-D2, that we've seen since long ago in the queue for Star Tours. And, people obviously have very strong emotions about Star Wars in general. And so like when you walk into that queue for the first time, you're like, wait a sec, these are the characters. These aren't, in fact, I think I've heard some crazy things like, and I could be getting this wrong, but Disney likes to recycle and reuse things. And I think at least some of the C-3PO animatronics we've seen in the parks were actually like suits used in one of the films.
Oh, it wouldn't surprise me.
Which is
especially
crazy.
Being MGM Studios.
Yeah, you'd think that like that would be in a museum somewhere. It belongs in a museum, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but I don't know if you're going to agree with this, but I'm just as impressed by the actual C-3PO character that used to show up in the daytime stage show, the Galaxy Far, Far Away. To me, it looked just as real as the audio animatronic in the queue did, even though I know there's a cast member there.
100%. I mean, it's, listen, they need a skinny twink to fit in that thing. It's essentially.
I have heard stories that that you do have to be a very, very specific size, and you can grow out of it accidentally.
My head went to very different places when you said you had stories about twinks and C-3PO. No. But, it's hilarious. So you're saying like, yeah, I would imagine if you wear that costume and you gain like 5 pounds, like it's probably a problem one day. That's crazy. Yeah, I would never, ever. I would look like the John Candy character in Spaceballs or something, more so than C-3PO. Doesn't he have to? Oh, no, he has to put on like one of the Stormtrooper-like costumes at one point in that movie, and that's ridiculous. But speaking of Stormtroopers, same deal. We have Stormtroopers all over the park. I don't know about you. What was that thing called at Disney's Hollywood Studios when they would march down the street? And there were like over a dozen of them.
March of the First Order.
The March of the First Order. I loved that. And like that was always a super impressive sight to me to see that many stormtroopers like just marching down the street, even more so than like we get in, that impressive moment in Rise of the Resistance when the doors open and you see all those stormtroopers like, nah, it's like, sorry, not enough movement in those for me. But marching down the street in those super, realistic on-screen costumes are amazing.
Can I tell you, my mom, who is not a Star Wars fan by any stretch of the imagination, that is one thing from the trip I took with them that she still talks about. Like, man, those Star Troopers were actually marching down the street, and it's still one of the most impressive parts of the parks to her.
That's awesome. Is that still around?
I think when Galaxy's Edge opened, most of the Star Wars stuff in the front half of the park migrated back there.
Except for the launch bay.
Well, yeah, true. I guess I mean like the outdoor live interactivity.
Performance stuff. That makes sense. Yeah. Crazy. So yeah, so we said Darth Vader, C-3PO, R2-D2. BB-8 has shown up for not only photo ops, also as an animatronic in the attraction, also on the stage show. So like, R2-D2, BB-8 rather, is kind of like, exactly as he looks on screen, even moves the same way he looks on screen, which is really cool.
Yes, the first time I saw that pre-show for Rise, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's him. But honestly, I had the same feeling when C-3PO became the pilot of Star Tours. When that door opens and you're feet away from him, it's like, that's C-3PO right there moving. I almost said, and breathing. Obviously, he's not breathing. But he's right there. That's him.
Yeah, totally. Now, I have a question about a character that kind of... It almost fits the bill with what we're talking about, but there's something slightly off for me always, and I'm curious if you feel the same way. Do you know who I'm getting at in the Star Wars universe?
Oh, in Star Wars. I don't know. Would it be, I was just about to say, would it be Chewbacca? What is off about him?
I don't know. It's something about, well, first of all, I feel like Chewbacca in the films is not only super tall, but like super slender. And I feel like he's always a bit fuller in the parks. I could be mistaken here, and then there's also something about the hair. And I don't know if this is true or not. Could be complete fallacy on my mind. But it feels like in the films, that costume is made of like real animal hair. And in the parks, probably fake. I have no idea if that's the case or not. But I don't know. There's something about Chewbacca whenever I see him. I'm like, it's like 95%. Or maybe it's all in my head.
Not necessarily, because, Chewbacca has not huge, but he has more of a personality than some of the droids do. So it is there is less of that feeling for like someone like C-3PO. For Chewbacca, for me, it's immediately like, okay, I'm meeting I don't know how much we're pulling back the curtain, but, I'm meeting a cast member who's dressed as Chewbacca. I have one for this that I don't know if you're going to agree with, but as far as looking like they do on screen, one of maybe my favorite character in the park of all time, just for the wow factor, is Groot. Not Baby Groot, but Groot, who meets by Mission Breakout, who's in the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie. I am so impressed by that.
That's interesting. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, in the film, he's 100% CG, right?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think you're right. There might be a human doing the movements.
It might be motion capture. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that character is 100% CG. I do have Baby Groot on the list a little later when we're talking about some scale characters. But yeah, I don't know. I would definitely disagree with you as far as
okay.
I'm not going to say I dislike the costume, but I definitely feel like it's not what I see on screen. No, but I also have an issue with CG on screen. Like it's funny. I recently watched, what's that movie on Netflix right now starring Ryan Reynolds? Do you know what I'm talking about? Very like,
yeah, The Adam Project.
The Adam Project. And I was watching that, and I was watching the movie. I was like, okay, the beginning of it, I'm like, this has such like E.T. vibes. It feels nice. It feels practical. And then like the last third of the movie or something, it's like so CG heavy. The minute you go CG heavy for me, I'm like, I'm gone. Like, it's just becomes something totally different to me. Which, as I'm talking about this, I should really hate the prequels, but I don't, for Star Wars, interestingly enough. But I don't know, when things get CG heavy and it's not like a style choice, it's like trying to be real, it really drives me crazy. So, yeah, I don't know, just, a big Groot being a CG character, as far as I remember, translating to a costume, to me, is not a good screen comparison.
Okay, I'm actually going to stand by it, but I didn't know how you would feel about that. But like, if you watch clips from the first movie, I still think like they pretty much exactly captured what Groot would look like. Even his height, he's 8-9 feet tall when you meet him.
So that statement is interesting to me. They pretty much captured what Groot would look like. Whereas what I'm looking for is, no, that is Groot.
I know, and that's what I mean too, but I can't, if he really is CGI, then I guess I can't really say that.
Yeah, it's interesting, though. Interesting. Before we move on to a different franchise, I do want to mention one thing with Star Wars that drove me crazy. Have you ever seen an Ewok in the parks?
Ewok, no. I've seen Jawas.
Okay. No, the Jawas are cute, but I remember as a kid meeting Ewoks, and I like have pictures of my brother with an Ewok and stuff. And it always drove me crazy because I'm like, it's so close, but I'm like, these aren't little people. Hire some little people, because it was like, short people, but not little people. And the Ewok was kind of a fail. Even though I love them, I still would love to see them in the parks, but I'm like, come on, employ some little people and let's get some real Ewoks in the park.
That is a shame, because those would be such a hit if they showed up at like DVC events or something.
Yeah. Now, another one we didn't mention was Boba Fett. We also see him at Disney's Hollywood Studios sometimes, and, helmet character, looks great on him. Let's move on. Since you started talking about Groot, let's move on to some Marvel stuff, because, Spider-Man and Black Panther, when you're covered head to toe in a mask and spandex, as long as you got the right body type, like, you look just like you do on screen. Although some people have problems with these costumes.
I was going to say, even these two, I see in the park, and I'm like, that ain't Spider-Man. That ain't Black Panther. There's just something weird about the costumes that you see the padding.
Okay.
And that takes me out of it.
It's a little party center, or what's that store called?
Party City.
Party City, there we go. Is it a little Party City for you?
It's like one step above Party City.
Oh, man, that's pretty rough. So there are probably cosplayers who do it better. The Stuntronic, though, the Spider-Man Stuntronic, I would say is pretty convincing on-screen counterpart.
Yes, I will give you that. Even like the close-up videos, I'm like, wow, that's very impressive.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Muppets then, okay? Because the Muppets, this is like my favorite when it comes to all of this. Because, listen, like, a lot of people, when it comes to the Disney parks, it's about bringing the family, bringing the kids. And like we talked about with Mickey Mouse, like, it's a very different representation of what we get on screen. But the Muppets are like exactly like we get on screen. But interestingly enough, they did not start that way in the Disney parks. Originally, in the Disney parks, there was a show called Here Come the Muppets at Disney MGM Studios. And this was like full-on walk-around characters. I remember this as a kid, and I remember, although I loved it and I like wanted my picture with Kermit and stuff, I still remember being like, why are they doing this? Like, I hated it, and I hated that like Jim Henson allowed it. It kind of pissed me off.
It was a choice. I never saw it in person, but the pictures are... you see it and you think, oh, this was definitely a thing of its time, because they would never do this today. Yeah,
I'm not going to lie, though, like... if those characters came out on like a long lost characters sort of event, I'd kind of be thrilled. I hate that they are what they are, but they're also so nostalgic for me. Oh,
sure. That makes sense.
They were great. But the first time we really saw the Muppets to scale would be Muppet Vision 3D. Now, this would be in animatronic form, but like it was essentially the puppet with, instead of a hand inside, robotics inside. So what we got was Bean Bunny, and we got Statler and Waldorf, and a bunch of penguins. And
Sweetums.
And Sweetums. Yeah, oh yes, Sweetums is exactly what he looked like on screen. In fact, at one point you could see him on screen and in the theater.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
At the end, which is, whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I loved this. I loved seeing them to scale. I will say, though, even though it was like the right scale, seeing them animatronic is still different than seeing a hand inside. It's, I'm sure it has to do with the movements and the limitations and stuff, but you can definitely tell.
Oh, sure. There's more of a stiffness when they're animatronics.
Yeah, but then eventually we did get them as puppets in the parks. I think the first time I remember seeing a Muppet as a puppet in a park, I think was a parade. Do you have any recollection of what it would be for you?
Well, I know of a parade they were in, but no, for me, as far as I know, the first time I saw them was in the Muppets Present Great Moments in American History, and that was 2016, so pretty recent.
Wow. Okay, yeah, no, I saw them in a parade a very long time ago, probably a decade ago, because they were doing that, like, give a day, get a Disney day. sort of thing here in California. Do you remember this? Yeah, where if you,
the Muppets were like the face of it.
The Muppets were the face of it. And it was basically like volunteer a day somewhere, like Habitat for Humanity, and we'll give you a ticket to Disneyland for a day. Remember those days? Remember those days when the parks did cool stuff like that? Remember 24-hour days? Oh, man. That was a lifetime ago. But in any case, to promote that, they had like a pre-parade float at Disneyland. And it was like a construction float, and they had Miss Piggy and Kermit on it, I remember, like riding down the street in puppet form. And so I remember that, like I said, probably about a decade ago. I don't know exactly when, but I think that was the first time I remember seeing him in the park in a puppet form.
I thought you were going to mention the Stars and Motor Cars parade. Am I wrong? Were they not in that?
I remember them in that as the full-size costumes.
Oh, okay.
The walk-arounds. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they definitely had that. Maybe in later years they did puppet form, but I don't remember that, if that was the case. So yeah, there's that. And of course, as you said, great moments in American history. And then recently, we got them back at Disneyland. It had been a very long time, but the Christmas party here this past year, we got their little caroling coach, and that was awesome. And I know the people who developed that are like, we want to fit the Muppets in as much as we can. In fact, they basically slashed the budget for that event considerably. Like, it was supposed to be like Oogie Boogie Bash size. And they were like, we just kept hiding the Muppets and like hiding it in the budget and being like, we can't lose this. And
I love that.
Luckily they didn't, because it was super, super cool. So there was that. But then, do you remember Constantine?
I remember reading about the hours-long line.
This was a big deal when Muppets Most Wanted came out. They had the character Constantine, which is kind of like Kermit the Frog's doppelganger, as part of Villains Unleashed at Disney's Hollywood Studios. And he was in prison behind bars, but still a puppet. And as you said, the line was very, very long to interact and get a photo. Now, he talked to the guests, right?
I believe he did, because he had that accent. It wasn't Kermit's normal speaking voice, so they were able to get away with it. But even beyond that, I believe that predated Great Moments in American History. So looking back, I mean, that really was kind of the first, like we were just talking about, really the first version of the Muppets in their true form that we got outside Muppet Vision. So no wonder people were, beside themselves to go see him.
The first time that I remember seeing a Muppet in real life was actually the D23 Expo. And it was either year 1 or year 2. I think it was year 1. So it would have been like 2009, maybe 2011. And they had a whole like Muppets presentation. And I remember they did photo ops after. And that was kind of like insane for me. I remember being there and being like, that's Kermit the Frog, that's Fozzie Bear. Like, this is unbelievable. And then since then, I've run into the Muppets backstage quite a few times and seen them lifeless, and that's always disturbing. I will tell you, it's very weird. I've seen them hanging in closets dead, and I've seen them laying on tables with their faces covered. And I was like, it's disturbing.
Oh my gosh, it's like a slaughterhouse.
It kind of is, yeah. The worst was I was at YouTube Space, and they were just literally laying on tables, and they had like cloth covering each of their faces. And I was like, is this for dignity, or are you just trying to like keep their faces clean? It was very, very weird. But in any case, they're beautiful. They're wonderful. I say more of them in the parks, please. Put them everywhere and anywhere. So that's fun. This next one on here. Do you remember when the Power Rangers were in Disney's Hollywood Studios or Disney MGM Studios?
I do. I met the Yellow Ranger, and they actually did come to mind, but I'm like, how much into the past are we reaching here? Oh, but for sure, Power Rangers were my childhood. So even though I was like in my 20s by the time I met them in the parks, you better believe I waited in line for that picture.
Do you know what year-ish that would have been? I didn't realize that.
Yeah. That was June 2008. Nope, June 2009.
Okay, so we're talking, was that 13 years ago at this point? Still a while ago, but still, I didn't realize that they were there even that late. Really interesting. Yeah. Disney actually owned them for a period of time, which I didn't realize. They like bought Fox Family or something like that, and it was part of a package deal, and that's how they ended up in the parks. I thought it was more like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles deal that they, a licensing deal, which, by the way, you've seen videos or photos of the turtles in the park?
Yeah.
That I don't understand. Talk about like the complete opposite direction where they're like, yeah, we're going to make this look like no turtle you've ever seen before. They don't look like the animated characters. And at the time, that fantastic live action movie that Jim Henson worked on was out. They didn't look like them. The turtles were weird, but like you and the Power Rangers, it was my childhood and I was still super excited to meet them. But yeah, that was completely opposite of what we're talking about. Very weird.
Yeah, which is kind of baffling because clearly in the movies, those are actors in turtle costumes. So it feels pretty easy to recreate that for a park situation.
I think they just wanted them to look friendlier because those films, they're dark, right? Like they're very dark.
Yeah.
I think they wanted them to look more like the cartoon, but like to me, they didn't really look like the cartoon. They looked like their own thing. So
yeah, they tried to soften the edges, but that's not what we love about those movies. We kind of like the edginess.
Yeah, so there was that. But in any case, so the Power Rangers, you remember that. I remember just seeing them drive by once, and I think when I saw it, they were coming out on a van, and I was like, that was the turtle van. Like, clearly, it was the turtle van with the new coat of paint. And then, like, years later, I saw that van again, and it was for the toy soldiers. They're the Toy Story soldiers. Army soldiers. And I was just like, that's totally the Power Rangers van, which was the Ninja Turtles van.
Oh my gosh. Was it Ace Ventura's van?
I don't know if he had a van, but that moment in history I need to research more. I was kind of flabbergasted when I found out Ace Ventura was once part of Disney MGM. I was like, I missed that for sure in real life. Before we move on, are there any other characters that, represent exactly as they look on screen?
No, the Star Wars, Marvel, and Muppets franchises, I think, pretty much cover this list.
And Power Rangers.
Sure, that's a small part of it, but, the other ones just have so many characters that fit this bill.
All right, so let's talk about the most impressive ones when done correctly, and that is the face character lookalikes. The first time, listen, there's always been face characters in the park. I shouldn't say always, but for a very long time, there have been face characters in the parks, and we just accept them for what they are, right? It's like a lot of times it's an animated character being turned into a human, but, in more recent years, it's humans portraying humans. And the first time I remember just being like, holy crap, was Captain Jack Sparrow, because they found somebody that looked enough like Johnny Depp that when you put on the wig and the eyeliner and stuff, it was kind of like, is that Johnny Depp? Do you remember that being a huge deal? Because I feel like I kind of lost my mind over it.
Yeah, in fact, I remember, I don't think it was more than a year or two ago when I saw him entertaining a small crowd in Magic Kingdom. And even then was like, man, I forget how good they make these actors, or they get actors for this. And yeah, the makeup helps, and the wig and the hat and so much costuming going on. But the actor too really sells it, and it is impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's always a knockout, but the original guy, whenever they cast these roles, there's usually an A person where they're like, okay, that's the one that when they're going to be doing TV specials and stuff, like, we're going to use this person. Whoever that first person was for Captain Jack Sparrow was really, really, really impressive. The problem with a role like this is if you're really, really good at it, you end up having some power as the performer to be like, I want more money because this is a rare thing you're getting here. And we know that Disney doesn't like to play that game. So they'd much rather have somebody that will pass as opposed to perfect. But when they got that perfect Jack Sparrow, I just remember being like, I hope this is the future of character interactions. Like, I never want to go back from here because this is awesome.
Yeah. It's like a perfect counter to, I remember when we met Prince Caspian in the late 2000s, and they were like, put him in the costume and throw a cheap wig on him, he'll pass. But it was nowhere near on the level of a Jack Sparrow.
Yeah, but it did get even more impressive with Jack Sparrow because at one point we got the real Johnny Depp portraying Jack Sparrow in the parks. This was inside of the attraction Pirates of the Caribbean and Disneyland Park. And I mean, it doesn't get more real than that, does it?
Yeah, I was going to ask if you remember this. It feels like a lifetime ago that happened.
I remember that because it was a big leak. I remember hearing that it was going to happen. And it was one of those things where like all of the bloggers and stuff, it leaked. And it was like, hey, make sure you're at Disneyland. I should say Disney leaked it. They wanted the press. And so they leaked it to the right people. And yeah, it was crazy. But yeah, that was wild. I mean, Johnny Depp loves doing this stuff, and he did like some fun stuff, even as the Mad Hatter, not like in park in costume, but he was on a monitor. Do you remember this?
I don't remember Mad Hatter stuff now.
He did. This was Disneyland as well, where they kind of set up like digital billboards in Town Square, like just advertisements for the new Alice in Wonderland movie. I think it was the sequel, Through the Looking Glass. And so it would be like character posters, and somewhere backstage, or maybe even a different state, country, I don't even know, was Johnny Depp like on a green screen in full costume, and he'd start talking to the people in the park in character. And it was like, cool. It was a really fun marketing thing.
I like that. Yeah, this was one of those events that was so big that even my friends who are not Disney park enthusiasts were like, oh, I heard that Johnny Depp showed up in Disneyland. And that's when you know that it made the rounds in the news. You
have friends that aren't Disney park enthusiasts?
Well, I'm their friend. I don't consider them friends.
I really hope they listen to this episode. That's hilarious. Hilarious. So yes, I think the best example of a face character lookalike, I don't think it gets any better than Captain Jack Sparrow, but there were some that worked really well, mostly because they were behind a lot of makeup. And Darth Maul is one of the ones that comes to mind.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Badass is the only word I can think of. I don't know if I can say that on your show. I'm so sorry.
You can totally say it. That's if it's not bleeped on television, it doesn't have to be bleeped here. You just can't say whole.
There you go. I will not add that to the end. That's what he is, though. Like, he's so intimidating.
Yeah.
And I never got to meet him in person, but just seeing pictures from, for instance, Star Wars weekends where he was there, they really captured it.
Yeah, they not only, I mean, he did the Jedi training as well, both here at Disneyland and Disney's Hollywood Studios. He would come out as part of that. And listen, there were definitely times where you're like, okay, not quite. But for the most part, it was like, a fully committed shaved head performer covered fully in makeup. And, it looked, whether or not this is the case, I don't know, but it looked exactly like the makeup used in the film. It didn't look like a cheap theme park replica. So it was impressive.
In Orlando Heat, I mean, it's got to be better than cheap.
What do you mean?
I mean, if he's doing Jedi training outdoors in Orlando with all that face makeup, it's going to be glistening after 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Maybe running.
Yeah, so he was one of the cool ones. Another one in the Star Wars universe was Queen Amidala, whom I've never seen in person, but I've just seen photos from Star Wars weekends. And she had so much going on as far as, big wardrobe and large wigs and that white face with those red dots in her face that, like, if you got somebody that looked close enough to Natalie Portman, it worked. And it was pretty convincing face character.
Yeah, I don't think I ever would have considered that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then another one that I think the only place we've ever seen him was the grand opening of Galaxy's Edge in Florida. And that was Hondo Anaka, which we mostly see as an animatronic in the queue for Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run. But he presented in a very convincing costume.
Yeah, I'm really glad you added this to the list. I totally forgot about him, but it really was a wow moment just to see him out there. And it's such a shame that they never brought him back.
Now I have a very naive question that I'm not even sure if you'll know the answer to, but had we ever seen Hondo in human form before? Or is he a character from only an animated series?
I could be wrong, and we will find out. I believe he was created for the attraction. Is that wrong?
Here's what the Google says. It says Hondo first appeared in the Star Wars lexicon on January 2nd, 2009. Star Wars The Clone Wars aired the episode Dooku Captured, the first of a two-part arc. And correct me if I'm wrong, Star Wars The Clone Wars was an animated series, right?
It was, and I'm seeing side-by-sides of his animated character and the character we got on opening day of Galaxy's Edge.
Okay.
There's a resemblance.
So this is really interesting because the perfect comparison that we're talking about here actually is very much not a good comparison to the on-screen counterpart, but is a great comparison to the animatronic figure.
True. That's true.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah. So, yeah, Hondo. I don't think he's ever... Somebody write in and let me know if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure we'd only ever seen him in animated form before Galaxy's Edge.
Well, speaking of characters that were animated and then became live action, it's only a matter of time before we see Ahsoka, right? Now that she's part of the Star Wars Disney Plus canon.
Who's that?
I don't know if canon's the right word. She's played by Rosario Dawson. She's got the really thick, things coming out above her ears, the tentacle-looking things, Ahsoka Tano. She was in The Mandalorian and the new Boba Fett series. She's like a side character who was a fan favorite in the animated series, so now they've created a live-action version of her, and I actually think it would be pretty easy to bring her to the parks and make it look believable.
All right.
I don't know.
They do try to continue this tradition of really good face lookalikes, but to me, it's never really come as close as Jack Sparrow did. You probably saw some video of Agatha Harkness at Oogie Boogie Bash this past year. They did
I put her down in my notes because I was curious if you thought she passed.
I would say she was passable, but I would not say she was convincing. With Jack Sparrow, if you put the performer that was originally at Magic Kingdom next to Johnny Depp, both in full costume, to me, I'd be like, you got to think a minute before you pick the right one if they don't open their mouths or anything. With Agatha Harkness, it was no, there was definitely a difference between Catherine Hahn and, who they had there. But still, great and good, but definitely not ooh, she just walked out of the TV screen,
Yeah, but who can be Catherine Hahn, really,
Well, they should have gotten Anna Gasteyer to do it.
Yes. I almost said the poor man's Catherine Hahn, but that is disrespect to her, so I will not say that. But
they don't really look like each other, but there is a similar quality to them that whenever I'm looking at one of them, I think of the other one, and I love them both. So it's it's just a lot of joy all around. But yeah, Derek, any more face characters before we move on?
Yes, and granted, this is a stage show, so they have the gift of distance between them and the guests so they can get away with a bit more. But I, for one, was super impressed by the Sanderson Sisters when that spectacular stage show debuted at Walt Disney World years ago. It's that's them on stage that I'm seeing right now.
Respectfully disagree.
Oh, no.
I would put them in the same level as Agatha for me. I'd be yeah, I get it. You get the right energy, you get the right, you're in the zone, but I would never put those performers next to the actual and ever think twice about it. The thing I would say is the costumes, I think were really on-screen accurate, at least from what I remember and could tell. But yeah, no, I see where you're coming from, but I'd give it a C.
Okay, that's fair. Maybe I'm being blinded by just how excited I was that at that time, the Disney parks were recognizing Hocus Pocus. What world is this?
I know, totally. I mean, listen, it's a great show. It's the reason I go to Mickey's Not So Scary when I do. It's for the Sanderson Sisters, and it's a spectacular show. And I know even, one of the people who plays Winifred, isn't she a known Bette Midler impersonator in the Florida area?
I think I've heard that, yeah.
Yeah, so I get it. The right energy is there, but I would never mistake them for the real thing. I'll just say that.
Well, okay. Carry on, then.
Okay, let's move on to characters in the correct scale, because as we've been talking about, a lot of characters, like Mickey Mouse, are not the right scale, and we just kind of have to accept it and move on. But I always appreciate it when the characters are in the correct scale. You talked about full-size Groot earlier. I want to talk about Baby Groot at Disney's Hollywood Studios, which was a meet and greet. Once again, we're going to have the CG real puppet problem here. So it's not an exact lookalike, but the scale is accurate. And I love that about it.
I agree. This was one of the most adorable meet and greets I've ever done. Just walking into the room and seeing him there on the little table of like exposed wiring and gears and, computer chips, whatever it was. So cute. And I remember meeting BB-8 and it was kind of awkward because there's no handler or anything. So you're just like, I guess I'll get beside you. Can I touch him? Is that okay? I don't know what to do. But with Baby Groot, like him or love him, they always had Star-Lord there beside him to be like your go-between, your mediator. And I think that worked well. Granted, I just took a bunch of pictures of Baby Groot and then left. Like I didn't necessarily need to meet Star-Lord, but it helped to have that buffer.
I've never seen a convincing Star-Lord.
Oh, no. In fact, this one was a real offender.
Gosh, if they got somebody looking like Chris Pratt in the parks, I would be so happy. And frankly, I'd be like, dude, you need to be employed at both Disneyland and Universal Studios Hollywood. Like, I want some Jurassic Park and Guardians representation from you all over.
That's true. Wow, yeah.
That'd be amazing. But yeah, no, one thing I will say about just Baby Groot and Groot in general, it drives me crazy. I know you love the meet and greet, and is it only at Disney California Adventure, a full-size Groot?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. He's unacceptable to me because he's Baby Groot in the attraction.
Is he?
Yes. Okay. Mission Breakout is Baby Groot, and then you walk out and there's full-size Groot. And I'm sorry, but Mr. Continuity here has an issue with that.
That's actually very problematic. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I just ruined it for you.
Well,
Let's move on to Cars Land, because this is a place complete opposite direction, going from tiny to huge. Cars are big, and so they got these meet and greets and also the animatronics in the attraction were like, they're the size of cars, and they are perfectly to scale. The argument I would have here, the problem I have here is the difference between the animatronic and the meet and greet mouths for Lightning and McQueen are different because they're projection in the attraction, continuity's sake. But regardless, the scale is there. I love that. Mater is done more consistently, I would say.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty impressive as well in the new show in Hollywood Studios, the Lightning McQueen's Racing Academy.
Yep.
It does feel like that is Lightning McQueen there in front of you. Although, to be fair, we don't know if it's to scale because there are no humans in those movies. So how do we really know?
Well, assuming the buildings are building size and the lampposts are lamppost size and such, they're the size of cars in the movie Cars. So maybe the whole world's miniature Matchbox size, who knows? In which case you would be right. But I'm going to assume that they're car size. In fact, I assume that Owen Wilson is sitting inside of Lightning McQueen, and one of the sequels, he's just going to come walking out and be like, that was weird.
Wow, really break the fourth wall. I would love that.
Yeah, I think that's going to happen. Didn't that happen in a Lego movie? Will Ferrell was playing with the Legos at the end or something?
That sounds like something Lego would do. It's been a long time since I've seen this.
If I'm remembering correctly, the movie ends and I think you learn Will Ferrell's there and his kids playing with the Lego set or something like that. I'm pretty sure that's accurate.
I think you're right. Yeah, this sounds really familiar. Yeah.
Listen, that sounds like how one of the Cars movies should end. It's just Owen Wilson and Larry the Cable Guy playing with Matchbox toys.
I don't know about this.
Not convinced. I love it.
As if that franchise isn't trashed on enough.
Let's move on to Baymax from Big Hero 6. This was a cool meet and greet, and this is, once again, going from animated to real world, which is way more difficult than something, to do it convincingly. But Baymax, I gotta tell you, if that animated character were real, it would be what we saw.
Yeah, I know I used the word adorable for Baby Groot, but I don't know if you've ever waited in line to meet Baymax, and he's taking his break, and you're in the front and you see him walk through the door and hobble over to his space. It's pretty freaking adorable, I gotta say.
Yeah, it is very cute. I met him at Disneyland, and it is a super cute meet and greet and just a convincing costume. Big fan.
Yeah. Yeah, they really nailed it. And I remember seeing pictures of my nephews going, and their mom sent me pictures of them meeting him, and just the giggles that you could see in the photos coming out of them, because I'm sure Baymax was doing his fist bump and all sorts of fun things with them.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
We got to talk about Figment, because I know that we have a bit of a disagreement on this. You are totally cool with, like, human-sized Figment. You were very excited about meeting human-sized Figment, walk around Figment for a photo op. Whereas I am adamant that Figment should always appear puppet size, as he does with Dreamfinder in the early days of Epcot. And he's the same size as he is in the attraction. I don't know, Derek. I gotta question your judgment here.
Listen, I like them both, and I probably respect the puppet size more. But hand to God, I would wait an hour for either of them to have a picture with puppet Figment or enormous human-sized Figment. I just want it. I just want it so bad. And I know he's there in storage somewhere. You bring him out.
Now, to be fair, like, we've never seen him, like, grow in size, but he does have, like, magical powers, right? So he could, yes. I guess, if you really want to suspend the disbelief, you could just say that he used some magic and became larger.
That could be part of the cue. And then,
you
like,
shrink down to the size
exactly. Yes, it's like an enormous door that you have to walk through, and all of the props around him are enormous.
And through a rainbow tunnel, I hope.
Of course. This writes itself.
I love it. Another character that is to scale. Let's shrink back down. This one was actually part of the Living Character Initiative. If you're not familiar with the Living Character Initiative, it's described as combining technologies to create new levels of guest interaction and bring characters to life like never before. This initiative develops seamless entertainment with characters who would otherwise have difficulty interacting with people in our world. The first was in 2003 with Lucky the Dinosaur. Of course, we can't compare that to any on-screen character because Lucky was created for the parks, but Remy from Ratatouille was also part of the Living Character Initiative, and Remy was tiny like a mouse in
Did you get to see him?
Not in person, no. I've only seen video of this, but I love it. It's so cute. They roll him around on a little food cart. They open the dome, and then there's a little cute interactive animatronic Remy. It's adorable.
I thought this was such a clever idea, and I'm sort of surprised they didn't bring him back even for a one-day thing now that his ride is open next door, because it was at Chefs de France, right?
Yes, I agree. I'm surprised. There's a lot of stuff that they do that they're like, yeah, let's just test it for a week and see what happens. I'm like, that cost a lot of money just to have it. This was available more than a week. But it is surprising when something like this just disappears. In fact, like Talking Mickey was part of the character initiative and he's gone, right?
Yeah, I feel like that was a huge step backwards to take that character away. I don't get it. Yeah,
I agree. I think part of it was pandemic related, right? Or was it before that?
I know that was before pandemic.
That was a weird choice. It's either, malfunction problems or staffing problems or something. But like, I remember when it went away, it was kind of like, yeah, it's not coming back. And I'm like, whoa, that's a kind of a blanket statement to make. I hope it's not entirely true. Hope it comes back. But also part of this character initiative, we have things like Turtle Talk with Crush and Monsters, Inc. Laugh Floor, which are quite literally exactly as we see them on screen because they are on screen.
Yes. Yeah.
These are my least favorite of what we're talking about today. I don't like anything. And we're going to get into this when we talk about like the future of character interactions and what they talk about with augmented reality and such. In fact, we can just get into it now. But like, I don't like anything where it's like they're not actually there. I'm like, if I'm looking at a screen, if I'm looking through glasses, whatever, I'm like, but they're not here. Even if they're talking to me, they're not here.
I agree. I think even between 2007 when Monsters Inc. opened and 2022 now, I think we're way less forgiving of that technology. Even at the time it was like, wow, this is cool, but it very quickly became okay, but like I could watch this at home.
Yeah, I think the best use of that technology is probably the cruise ships. I think they use it in the animator's palette while you're eating dinner. Like the characters will, if I'm remembering correctly, they'll go around the room essentially to different screens throughout the room and interact with the diners. And that's like the setting for it. It's something that is like a cool plus to an experience I'm already having, but I don't want to wait in line to have that experience.
Yeah. If we are talking about characters to scale, though, would this fall into the category? I was really impressed the first time I saw Lumiere in Enchanted Tales with Belle, and I know, the secret behind how he works, but especially compared to the live on stage Lumiere, who is taller than I am, it was really refreshing and kind of neat to see an actual to-scale Lumiere sit up there on the mantle.
Yes, I actually have this like right at the end of my notes. It's being shown time and time again that the studies show that characters are a huge reason why people take a Disney vacation. Walt knew this, and the company currently knows this as they continue to try and make character interactions more realistic and more meaningful. A great example is Enchanted Tales with Belle, where like we are used to, we still have Lumiere at Disney's Hollywood Studios, ginormous, bigger than a beast, right? So to think that we've gone from that technology in 1991 to Lumiere and Enchanted Tales with Belle, where, I mean, that's pretty much as close as you're going to get as on screen as possible. His movement is fluid. His face is literally animated. He's pretty much to scale. I think that that's a great example. So yeah, and I love that they're doing that. Continuity's sake, I want when you create something like that, retire the old is how I feel. I get this way even with like Sebastian. Like you've seen the Sebastian walk around, right?
I met him this year.
At what? Oh, at a race?
The Run Disney, they had him out there, and you better believe I got in line for that one.
Terrifying. So like when you have like cute animatronic to scale versions, I'm just like, it's time to retire it. And I get it. There's a difference between seeing an animatronic and meeting a character, but like, he should be a puppet at the very least these days. So yeah.
No, I agree.
But yeah, it's being done well. So there's that. So what is the future of character interaction? To me, it very much seems like we keep hearing about metaverse and augmented reality, and that seems like where they're going.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you had asked me, like I said, if you had asked me 4 years ago, I would have said, it's more talking characters, because talking Mickey is one of the coolest things I've ever had an experience with at a Disney park. And then that's gone. And so I don't know. Tell me what you imagine augmented reality to look like in terms of character interactions.
Having to go into a space, put on glasses, and then the character showing up in your glasses, but looking like it's living in the space. They've tested this at Disney California Adventure, I believe with Tinkerbell. They've tested stuff like this. And I feel like that technology would be better used on a ride. If you were, imagine riding through just a traditional Fantasyland dark ride with augmented reality glasses on, and let's just say the sets are empty, but then like the animated characters start showing up. Now this would be very tough to do, I would imagine, because you're actually like moving through the attraction. But like that's where I feel like that technology would be great. That is not how I want to meet my characters. I want to meet something I can touch, it's I don't know. There's just a huge difference to me. But I do feel like they're kind of heading in that direction, and the metaverse is becoming a thing, so meeting characters in a metaverse could be the future. I don't know, but I do feel like in the next 10 years we're going to have some massive changes when it comes to characters in the parks.
Yeah, I just don't see it. I mean, I can see things changing, but I also think that nothing's ever going to beat that feeling of, running up to Mickey for your first time. It's been the same way since the 50s. You're going to get a chance to meet Mickey when you go to a Disney park.
But if they can save money by employing less people, I don't know. I don't think it's out of the question, is all I'm saying.
Sure.
I don't know. It'll be interesting. But yeah, I think it would be insane if there was ever a day where you walk into Disneyland or Magic Kingdom or whatever, and you don't have like a full-size costumed Mickey there. That would be insane to me. And I would assume they recognize that. I just think with like future characters, more unique or different versions are going to start coming. So
yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Like the Lumiere we're talking about, who's had the exact same costume since 1991, versus Mickey, who's had actually a lot of changes over the years. So you can tell kind of which ones Disney puts more value on, obviously.
Yeah. And as I've said a bunch of times in this episode, continuity is very important to me. I have just had to accept the fact that sometimes Ariel has a fin and sometimes she doesn't, and for some reason the beast decided to become a beast again instead of stay a prince. This drives me crazy, but this is never going to change.
Listen, sometimes in a movie Rapunzel cuts off her hair, but sometimes when you meet her in the park, she grew it all back and it's blonde again.
Yeah, I don't know. I just have to accept it, don't I? Accept it and move on?
I think so. I get it. I mean, Beast is going to be way more interesting to meet than just another, cut and paste white guy in a prince costume.
Wow, it sounds like you hate white guys.
I do. I'm very into white guys. But also like Pinocchio, I mean, it's not going to be as interesting to meet just a real kid dressed as Pinocchio as opposed to a wooden boy.
Okay, now that is an opportunity that is missed. Why have we not met a Pinocchio puppet? Why are we still meeting a costumed Pinocchio?
That is very interesting. Oh my gosh, that would be, especially what they've done with Miguel now. That would be so
awesome.
Cool. Why have they not done that?
I don't know. I think they should definitely do that. But in any case, this is a super nerdy conversation. I appreciate you diving into this rabbit hole with me. I actually really appreciated this because I kind of said to you before we started, if we were talking about the examples where Disney missed the mark, I think we could go on for twice as long. But it makes me really appreciate taking a look at the things where they kind of nailed it. And I know Disney probably gets third-party people to create a lot of these costumes, but still, like, it makes you appreciate it even more when it's so similar to what you see on screen. One thing that I always find so fascinating, especially about the big mascot characters, is Disney does it in a way that, like, they are characters we love to see, we love to meet, when so easily these costumes can go creepy. Like, when you think of Chuck E. Cheese's, like, that rat's a little scary looking. Like, when you think of anything that isn't Disney, well, Disney or Universal, I should say, I don't know, they're often very scary looking, and there's something about dead eyes on them or something that just feels super unnatural. But Disney and, some of the bigger companies have really figured out a way to make them cute and lovable, even though they're massive. And you don't think so?
I don't know. I wonder if there's something about the environment you're in. Like, I'm going to feel much less safe at a Chuck E. Cheese with a bunch of other families than I am at a Disney park. Because if I met, for instance, Queen of Hearts at a Chuck E. Cheese, I might say she looks scary.
She's a good example, but like, for example, when I see Mickey Mouse riding down the streets of New York in the Macy's parade, I don't think he looks weird in an out-of-place location like that. I think he looks great.
Sure.
I don't know. I think
of course.
I think they've made the characters very lovable. And listen, I'm going to take a step back here for a second, and I'm going to say something that several years ago I fought pretty hard on this show. Do you remember when Mickey and Minnie's heads changed the last time?
Yeah, when Shanghai opened?
Yes. I've grown to kind of like them.
I adore them, yeah.
I didn't at first. I fought hard. I was like, I don't know. They just don't look right to. They look pretty darn good, and the smaller in scale, the eyes have gotten smaller. Parts of it have gotten smaller. The smaller it can get, the less intimidating it is to a child, and I will admit, it looks good. I was wrong.
Aw, that makes me happy. Not that you were wrong, but that you appreciate them now.
No, I do appreciate them. They've certainly grown on me, and I've come to like them. But shall we get on to some trivia?
Yes, please.
All right, let's do it.
Do you know the answer? Get your brain gears churning and play along. It's trivia time.
Now, before we jump into the trivia, I want to remind folks that they can gain DCTC bonuses like live stream Q&As, episodes you won't find anywhere else, and more by joining Disney Coast to Coast on Patreon. And don't forget that any new patron joining in April of 2022 will have their first month subscription matched by me for the foundation Autism Speaks, where they're enhancing lives today and accelerating a spectrum of solutions for tomorrow. To become a patron, simply click on the Patreon link in this episode's description, and to learn more about Autism Speaks, click on the show notes. Now, Derek, do you want to hit me with a trivia question first, or shall I hit you?
I'll go first because there might be more that I'm forgetting, but I thought this would just be like a fun thing for you and I to hash out here.
Let's do it.
I'm curious if you can name characters who sometimes, even today, appear in a Disney park as a face character, and at other times appear with like a full sculpted headpiece.
The first I can think of is Fairy Godmother from Cinderella. I can remember,
yes.
I always knew her as a face character, but I remember watching like one of the old Easter parades and she had a mask on. I was like, ooh, creepy. So,
well, can I tell you that character still to this day appears in Tokyo? In fact, just last year, they changed it to make it a little less creepy, but they didn't do away with it. It's still a mask.
Don't love that. So yeah, Fairy Godmother, Captain Hook, I've seen both. Hades, I've seen both. Basically, anybody who has done a castle show, stage show, tends to have done both because they tend to put face characters on those stages, but then the meet and greets will be the full mascot kind of costumes. Those are the three that come to mind. Let me think. Oh, Jafar, we've seen. I mean, if you think of, the Aladdin Spectacular at DCA, we had Jafar there.
Yeah, on that same note, I actually, kind of a technicality, but I also put down Genie for that show.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah. So it's interesting when it comes to those stage shows. I know Disney very much looks at that as these are performers portraying these characters. These are not the characters. That's how they look at it. But then, as far as like Frozen, a musical spectacular. So those performers are performing the roles. But then when you meet them in Animation Academy or that animation area, that's Anna and Elsa. So that's an interesting differentiation. I don't know if they use the same logic on the Magic Kingdom Cinderella Castle stage, but it kind of feels that way.
I think, gosh, I don't know. That's a really good question. I've never really read like the description in the park map, saying, is it a show with actors? I don't know.
Yeah. I can't think of any others off the top of my head. Do you have any others?
Those were the ones that came to mind first. The three from the Hocus Pocus Spectacular, and then of course, infamously, Fairy Godmother. The only other two I had are actually past characters, so these costumes have gone away. But I love seeing old pictures of the Mad Hatter, which used to be a sculpted face. And now he's just a face character. Mm-hmm. And same with Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather, who are in Festival of Fantasy as you see their faces. But old pictures, they had a face very similar to Fairy Godmother, where it was a plastic painted face.
Yeah. Interesting. Those are the ones I could think of. Anybody listening, if you think of any others, shoot an email, give a call, send a tweet, let us know. But yeah, that would...
Yes.
Be the list. I wouldn't be surprised if there were more, but those are the ones that come to mind.
Well, this was the one where no matter how many times I changed my wording in Google, it would still bring me up with like COVID face mask policies for characters.
Well, we're going to have to rely on people's memories with this one, but I think that's a pretty good list, what you got there. I like it.
And it's fun to see the differences too. And honestly, in some ways I like both, but I can see why they got rid of some of those masks for some of them.
Once again, for me, it's a continuity thing. Pick one and go with it.
I'll give you that.
Make the change and just do it. For me, I want to know, where did the original character costumes that were presented at Disneyland come from?
You mean like the first guest who ever could meet Mickey Mouse? Where did that Mickey come from?
Yeah, where did those, like the opening day characters and for the many, first several years of Disneyland, they were not Walt Disney creations. Characters in the park were not something that was intended, and it just became a thing, but they came from someplace very specific. Do you know where they came from?
That's a good question. Maybe like, they wouldn't partner with Universal, but I was going to say some sort of like monster creation shop.
It was actually the Ice Capades. Disney used to license the characters to the Ice Capades, so they were part of the show. And then when they were going to open Disneyland, he said, "Hey, why don't you bring them to the park?" But very much like I was talking about before with the Frozen show, it was very much not considered to be Mickey Mouse. It was considered to be somebody in costume portraying Mickey Mouse. And it wasn't until years later, I couldn't find an exact year, but it wasn't until years later that Walt was like, these characters need to be a mainstay here, and they need to be less creepy, because they were very much designed for athletes who needed to see and bend in certain ways and stuff. They were made for ice skaters. So it's interesting. But yeah, the Ice Capades is where that all started.
I love that.
Yeah, fun times.
Makes a lot of sense.
It certainly does, yeah. Anyway, Derek, thank you so much for coming on the show. Plug whatever you want before we say goodbye here.
Okay, sure. I mean, we always have our Disney podcast called The Mad Chatters. You can hear Jeff pretty frequently, or, semi-frequently over there. If you want to find me personally, I am Derek in Lewis on Instagram, and I'm on Twitter as well, Derek Lou. So come say hey. Thanks for having me.
That was Derek N, as in no, Lewis. It sounded like you said Derek and Lewis for a second. I was like, nope, it's just you.
You can find both of us there, Lewis and Derek.
Fantastic. Well, Derek, thanks so much. This was a fun convo, and I'll talk to you next time.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning into this episode. Don't miss any future episodes by subscribing and following Disney with a Z, coast to coast, on your favorite podcast app. This episode has been executive produced by Robert Scontrino. Gain rewards like Robert by visiting the Patreon link in this episode's description. Basically, anything you need can be found in this episode's description. From additional information and links discussed in this episode found in the show notes, to the DCTC hotline where you can leave a voicemail and be heard on a future episode, access to the show's official website, some free gifts from me to you, and so much more. So be sure to check out this episode's description. Other than that, folks, have a magical day. Bye!
Thanks for listening to Disney Coast to Coast. Have a magical day.
Disney Coast to Coast is produced and hosted by Jeff DePauli. Learn more about the podcast and become a supporter at DisneyCoastToCoast.com. This podcast is part of the DePodcast Network. Learn more about this show, plus find more quality and entertaining podcasts at DePodcastNetwork.com. That's DEPodcastNetwork.com.